I wanted to welcome all of you. My name's Carrie. I am the program director for Rebuilding Together Peninsula. We're a nonprofit organization located in Redwood City, but we serve the entire San Mateo County Peninsula as well as northern Santa Clara County. And what we do is we provide free repairs to low-income homeowners and community facilities throughout the peninsula. And we've been assisting this process with the San Bruno Long-Term Recovery Committee in making sure that all of the homeowners who were affected by the San Bruno fires have the information and resources that you all need to think about that repair and rebuilding process yourself. We've been proud to partner with United policyholders throughout this process, and all these workshops and the events that you guys are seeing today and the one we had in November, were all funded by the Silicon Valley Community Foundation as their support of your recovery effort as well. So with that, I wanted to just note a couple of quick housekeeping items for all of you. On your way in, I'm hoping that you all picked up a packet of the workshop presentations. I want to note that this is for all 4 presentations. So if you missed the first one, it's still in here, and if you can't stay here for all of them, you'll find all the information here. There were also a couple of different handouts that you saw. Both Jim and Michael, our presenters, each had a little handout there. And then there was a green sheet that is a referral list that our organization put together, as well as a white resource guide. And that provides you more of a general introduction to how you think about working with vendors and contractors through this process. So I'm pleased to introduce our 2 panelists for today. I wanted to have Jim Zach come up first. Jim is an architect, and his company actually is both a design and build firm, and he can explain a little bit more about that option for people. He's also a member of the American Institute of Architecture. The AIA, they have a Ask the Architect table in the next room, and we do hope that people will go to the other room to connect with all the vendors as well. And then after he kind of gives you all a sense of how you go through the architectural design process and how you work with an architect and things like that, then I wanted to turn it over to Michael McCutcheon with McCutcheon Construction. Thank you. And Michael also has had extensive experience working with a lot of homeowners, especially those from the Oakland fires, and a lot of relevant experience, so much in fact that he'll also be talking at the next workshop too. So we're pleased to have him here, and he's a part of NARI, the National Association of the Remodeling Industry. And NARI also has a table next door, and it's a Ask the Contractor table. So we're very pleased that you all could join us for today, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim. I'm sorry, just one quick note. A quick note just about the format. We are very pleased to have San Bruno Cable capturing this so that if you have to leave in the middle or if neighbors want to know what went on in these sessions, they are capturing all of this. In order to make sure that they capture everything, however, I do need to make sure that everyone who asks a question or wants to say something tries their best to use a microphone. We do have a freestanding mic, and we'll be moving that around to make sure that people are able to ask those questions. But I'd like to ask, if at all possible, for people to try to hold some of those questions to the end. And then I will also move the microphone around for you. Okay, Jim, thanks.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for coming. As Carrie said, there are some handouts out there, and I just wanted to say that I was a little late in getting my presentation together, so I expanded on it a bit, and there's a handout that I prepared that follows my talk a little bit more closely than the PowerPoint handout, so if you want to get that, that'd be great. So I'll tell you a little about my firm. As Carrie said, we're a design-build company, primarily architects. We have a construction component to our business, focus a lot on residential, some commercial. Done a lot of remodeling, a lot of new houses in the Bay Area. We're based in San Francisco. We work all over the Bay Area, heading north, heading south, and a little bit out of the state. I got involved with this soon after the fire, just thinking, having had some experience with the Oakland Hills fire, how do people move forward, and how could I help get some organization together to educate people on how to work with an architect. And so that was my presence here today, was organizing a group of architects representing the San Francisco AA and architects in general to provide you with some information on just getting started. And typically the architect would be at the front end of that process. So in thinking about the talk today, the first thing that came to mind was it's a terrible, terrible disaster, but now it's an opportunity to move forward and do something good to make lemonade out of lemons. I think that the idea of building a new house is daunting for some people, but it's also an opportunity that you can get something like you never could have imagined that you had, and that's one really positive thing I think to take away from this, is that you really can get just about anything you want if you want to put the effort into it. So I wanted today to talk a little bit about the role of the architect, just the process, how an architect can help you, do you need an architect, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think you should hire an architect. I think that it's important to understand that in California, generally speaking, there's other ways to get a house built. And clearly I'm here representing my profession. I think that we have a lot to offer. Some of the alternatives, just to put it out there, is that there are contractors that draw plans. There are building designers that may not be licensed architects. That's an important thing to consider, is that do you want to work with a licensed professional? Do you want to work with an unlicensed contractor? Probably not. You might think about the same thing with an architect. But technically in California, if you get an engineer to stamp plans, there's ways to get building permits for residential buildings without an architect. But I don't think you're going to get as much as you could get in the hands of a good, experienced, licensed professional. You can buy house plans. It's a pretty common thing. They're difficult in California. They may work in some states that have a much less stringent approval process, much less stringent seismic and energy requirements than we have in California. But I've never really worked with anything like that, but I've talked to people that have, and it's difficult. You get a floor plan and some pretty basic drawings, and they really don't meet the requirements that you need to get permits in California. So ultimately, you have to do a lot of work beyond that. They also don't take site into consideration at all. You have very specific sites to work from, and if you're buying a design that someone made for a generic site, how does that work with your site in regards to topography and sun and access to views and all these other things that an architect can take into account when they're designing a house? There's a trend towards modular houses in many different ways, but I think we've all seen articles, and Dwell magazine is great for promoting it, and it's an interesting idea. We got excited about it a number of years ago, but it's very difficult and complicated, I think, in dense urban areas. How do you take, again, a generic building that's sort of built in a factory and delivered on a truck and make it adapt to a very specific site? And if you're out in the country and don't have a lot of parameters, maybe it's an idea, but I think it's more difficult. It's not impossible. There's probably some ways to do it, but most of you, if not all of you, will probably end up building from the ground up and site-built houses. Some of the other things that architects do, in California, we have a very, very extensive approval process. And as I mentioned, seismic standards, energy standards, there's a new green building code went into effect last week in California, which is a good thing for everybody, because now your new house will be green by code, and that's a code upgrade. If your insurance policy has code upgrade requirements, you get green building by default. But there's a lot of people that have to be involved in building a house. There's surveyors and soils engineers and structural engineers and potentially civil engineers and the permit process. A lot of different people, and architects are very well versed at navigating through all those different people. They can help you select people. Most of us have experience working with consultants and can bring people to the table to put together a team. And ultimately, building a house is a team effort. So architects typically are pretty good at that. Assisting at pricing and budgeting early in the process and in selecting a contractor. I think looking through Michael's presentation, one of the things he's going to recommend, and I agree wholeheartedly, is bringing a contractor into the process early on. And whether that ultimately is the contractor you work with or not, you never know, but the best projects sometimes are ones that get this team together early in the process. And an architect can help put that team together. So costs, green, insurance is another really big one. I was relatively young in my career when the Oakland fire happened, but I actually did get a couple of projects. And one of the first things we did in our entree into projects was actually helping homeowners, in a sense, draw their existing house that was damaged or gone. And it's essential, if helpful, if not essential, in working with the insurance company to document what you had before. And an architect can help do that. Some people have some documentation. The city might have some documentation. One of the projects I worked on, we went out and measured the foundation, and just through extensive meetings with the client, literally redrew their house. And that allowed us to then go out to contractors and get real numbers for what the value of their old house was. And so that could be a really good start in working with an architect, is hiring someone to help you with the as-built drawings. And it could be, in my mind, a completely separate contract from the one that you use to actually design the house, but just to get the ball rolling. So the other component of what an architect does, and I think one of the most important ones, is design. And I have to admit that I wasn't that familiar with your neighborhood. I've driven by a couple times in the last few weeks, and think that there's a lot of opportunity here. I mean, it's a very well-established 50-year-old, 50, 60-year-old neighborhood, but one that you can see has been adapted to people's needs over time, that the houses might have all looked similar 50 years ago, but through time and additions have changed. And one of the things that I think about is this idea of opportunity, and that you can really do so many different things than one might have imagined in the house that you lived in if you're starting from scratch. And I imagine some people might want to just build the house that they had before. Maybe minor changes. I want to open up my kitchen or move a window, and you start from there. And that's one possibility. It's also makes me think that there's different ways, to hire an architect, and different amounts of service you can get from an architect. But I think that the key point is really that with a good architect, the design possibilities are pretty limitless in terms of what you can do. Selecting an architect, really important. I think one of the most important things above and beyond experience and licensure and all that stuff is relationship. And with designing a house, this is someone that you're going to be pretty intimately involved with for a long time, for 12, 18 months through the construction of your house. And if you don't get along with them, it's not going to be a fun process for anybody. And I'll always remember a teacher in school recommending or suggesting that you had to get to know your clients well enough to sort of understand how they brush their teeth in the morning, you know, and so that how do people live, and the more that you can communicate with your architect how you live, the better they can tailor the house to your needs. The other thing I think about is just aesthetics, and a lot of times with houses people think in styles, and do you want a Tuscan house, a colonial house, or whatever, and I think that one, just in general, I don't believe that's the way to approach the design of houses, and I think specifically to this neighborhood, it's not necessarily the right approach, but it's starting from function and need, and then growing out and letting kind of the look and feel of a house evolve out of that, and not just from a predetermined aesthetic. I think you should find architects that have residential experience. I think that kind of following along on the aesthetic thing is that you might find someone that you get along with really well, but it might not have a portfolio that looks exactly what you might imagine your house to be, but I don't think that has to be the deciding factor in hiring an architect. I think it's important to think about. If you see someone that does wonderful Victorian houses and you don't want that, you want something that's modern or vice versa, that you should consider it, but most good architects can work in a very, very broad range of styles. So I know I'm going to run out of time here, but really important part of the process is fees and contracts, things like that. And again, there's many different ways that architects charge, but generally speaking, you're going to end up paying somewhere between 9 and 15% of the cost of construction. That's a pretty broad range. And there's a lot of different things an architect can do, and there's some things that other people can do in the process. And one of the things that I thought about in putting this little presentation together in kind of my last page is that people don't really think about when they're living in a house, if you had to start from scratch, all of the things that you have to think about and decide on and pick and select. And it goes from the big things like the space to the windows to the garage door, but down to the towel bars and the door pulls and the door stops and all those little things. And that if you don't pick it, then you have to think of somebody else to help select those things and specify those things. So the more of that work you take on, you could lessen the cost of the architect. I don't really recommend it. You also want to think about when you're hiring an architect, are they including the consultant fees in their fee, or are you paying the consultant fees separate, the engineer, the soils engineer, surveyor, and things like that? So I guess I'm running out of time, and we can maybe answer other questions during the Q&A. Thank you.
So just a couple of quick notes about what is in your handouts too. There is mention of the expedited permit process. So I just want to acknowledge that Aaron Acknan is here from the city of San Bruno. And if there are questions that come up about the permit process or about the plans that people might have on file with the city, Aaron can answer those questions. And then the phases of how the project happens with the architect, I think that that was also outlined nicely by Jim. So now I'm going to invite Michael on up to talk more about the process from once you have your design to working with the contractor. And then again, we will have lots of time for questions toward the end.
Thank you, Carrie. I guess we have a few slides to show. We're going to talk a little bit about the role of a general contractor in a very quick way. So obviously we build stuff. Keep going. We protect your house and the neighborhood. Just you see there's fences out on the site now, but there'll be fences during construction. Keep going. We frame it. Keep going. This is a nasty slide for you guys, but there could be unexpected things you would find underground or with the city or other things. We deal with the unexpected. And keep going. So there's a little slide about some of the things we do, starting with could help you with the insurance settlement. I think it's going to be challenging to do it without the help of a good local general contractor and all their contacts. Working as a team is something I'm going to favor. So we, as general contractors, can work with you and the architect to make sure you get something you can afford, built on time and on budget. We coordinate with all the various parties, particularly during the construction phase. We've got to build it on time and on budget, but also we've got to meet your quality standards so you're happy with it, not just today, but 5 and 10 and perhaps even 20 years from now. I can tell you that in the Oakland fire area, Jim I'm sure would support this, maybe half of the homes have significant construction defects. They were not built by local people. The ones that were built locally, whatever defects were there, were taken care of. But there's a lot of controversy up there. Hundreds of thousands of dollars of construction defects with leaks and things like that. No reason to have that if you hire good local people. Go ahead. So you need to assemble a team. And who's on that team? Well, there's a lot of people, but 3 of the central parties would be the architect or designer, you as the owner, and contractor, the builder. I'm going to advocate for a team approach where everybody works together early on. Some of you may have already selected an architect. Have some people picked an architect? Anyone here? Or maybe you thought you want an architect. Does anyone think they want one? So how many people have a contractor? Anybody know someone that they want to use? So those are places to start. You may just be still kind of in the recovery phase and dealing with the insurance company and the hassle and relocating and blah, blah, blah. But you're going to want to start from one angle or the other. Most people will typically start with the architect first and work with the architect to select a contractor. Or you could start with a contractor and they could help you find an architect. But anyway, you build a team. I throw in one slide for green building. It's an avid interest of mine, and I know Jim's and most of the people here. What does it mean? It means that you can make a house that not only meets the building code, but actually performs better. Why do you care? It'll save you money in the operation. It'll be a more durable house. It'll have better indoor air quality, because we can put products in your house that don't poison you. I have some people say, I don't want that green building. So then my question is, how many of you want more toxic stuff in your house? I see there's relatively little demand for that. But most people don't realize we have choices in insulation and cabinets and flooring. You need advice on that. And one great source is Build It Green, which is an important organization to me. I happen to be the president of California's Build It Green. But check it out. Green building is an important thing for you to know about. Keep going. So some of the quick things would be use low or even better no VOC paints. They don't smell, and it's less toxic for you and your family. You can actually use integral color stucco, so you never have to paint. Avoid formaldehyde. You can actually use recycled materials. And you might say, that's weird, I'm building a new house. But you might find that there's something that adds some charm in the house that could be recycled from somewhere else. Don't ignore salvaged materials. Renewables like bamboo, you may have heard of bamboo flooring. You can use cork flooring and things like that also. Solid surfaces are generally better for indoor air quality than carpet. If you're going to use carpet, like this carpet we're on here is a low nap carpet. So, engineers will tell you, I've heard them in talks say that when they calculate the weight of a high-rise building, they have the dead load, which means the weight of the building itself. And when the architect specifies the carpet or interior designer, the engineer uses a factor of 4 to 5 times that initial weight to calculate the end weight of the carpet, because they know carpet picks up so much dust and debris over its life. So every time you step on carpet, you can't see it very well, but when the light's coming in low in the window and you pound your pillow or you step on your carpet, all that dust comes up. Well, we're breathing that. So if you have a solid surface flooring, maybe with some area carpet, you can send them out to be cleaned. It's much better for you. And then just try to choose local vendors, local material suppliers. The less it gets shipped across the world, the better. And these are some examples of finishes. The upper left, you see up there is the bamboo, recycled glass counters, and so forth. Okay, let's keep going. There's an example of a recycled tub. Let's keep going. So what is the process, though, that beyond green building? What else can we talk to you about? So we'll quickly hit, very, very quickly, some of the highlights. The budget. The budget's got a lot of things in it besides just the flat construction cost and contractor fees. There's design. Maybe it's 9 to 15% or 5 to 15 or whatever it is. Permit fees might be significant. Have a contingency for things that come up. 5 or 10% is always a good idea. But don't forget the other stuff, like furnishings. I was listening to the video that was made of the first session 2-3 months ago, and the person said, oh, we forgot window coverings. Well, I noticed those people didn't really have anyone helping them with the adjustment, but the settlement. That's a pretty obvious thing to leave out, but don't leave out stuff like that. It's really basic. And design your building to accommodate your window coverings, whatever they might be. Work with the architect to think about privacy, sun control. How about moving costs, landscaping, fences, all those things, irrigation, they all need to be considered in your budget. So let's continue. It's impossible to read, but the idea here was just your budget should be detailed. So there's, I think, 1 or 2 slides, perhaps, yeah. It's detailed. We can't read it all, I get that. But the idea is, it's not just like, it's X amount of dollars, $475,000, 623. That doesn't work, You need to have the details. You need to know what's going on in every part of that house, from gutters, downspouts, windows, whatever is involved. So that's budget. Should be in detail. Keep going. And you'll find that the budget will evolve and change. And a good contractor, like here, this particular one is an example organized by what are called the CSI codes. Doesn't much matter, but architects know what it means. And it's easier for architects if we as contractors estimate things in some way that they can find the stuff. And so here's an example where a budget's changed on a job, and we're just trying to track why has it changed. Well, we added that skylight, we took out that window, and so it's important that the budget is a living thing. It even evolves a little bit during the construction. So let's keep going. But beyond the budget, which is what everybody's focused on, there's the schedule. So an example of a schedule, again, impossible to read, I realize, but is a critical path method schedule should be done. This particular version is in Microsoft Project, is what my office uses, but many of you may be engineers or something, you're familiar with that idea, but really the concept is you want to figure out what's going to happen on that job every day from the beginning to the end. You can actually do a critical path schedule for the design as well. You work with the architect like Jim, and you work with the city, and they tell you how long each step is going to take. You think about the things you have to order and select, and you put that in the schedule. So now you have a very realistic idea. A quick anecdote on this is I remember doing a fire settlement in '93. I did a dozen at that time, and one of them we had gotten a very good settlement from the insurance company for the owner, and the owner was delighted with that. And the pricing we came up with was very competitive. But he came to me and said, I'm not going to use you. And I said, why not? Well, XYZ construction company said they could build my house in 4 months, and you're saying it's going to take 8 or 9 months. And I said, wow, I don't know how they're going to build it in 4, but if you believe it, I guess I can understand. You want to get back in your house. So they chose those guys. Meanwhile, we built some in the neighborhood and finished in the 8 or 9 months. They took 18 months. So, you know, you want to see the details, and you want to have your architect review those details, and you want to use somebody that can convince you that it all makes sense. So look at the schedule, not just the budget, and keep going. And you're going to have a contract. Everything has a contract. And one of the main points I'm going to make here is when I say contract, you're smart. You immediately think of those maybe the contract you get when you have to update your software, you know, and it says you have to agree, and it's like 40 pages, and you scroll through. I mean, okay. Or if you've refinanced or financed a house, and you see the 200 or 400-page document, you have to sign an initial 200 times. That's the words. But in our industry, equally important, probably more important, are things like the plans and the specs and the budget and the schedule. That is equally or maybe more important. Because in a way, I mean, they're much more than this, but part of what an architect does for you is they're like the design scribe. They're documenting what you're supposed to be getting and the fact that it's all going to work, okay? So you really want to look beyond just the words. Absolutely, look at the words, but look at the other factors as well. Okay, we're almost done, I think. So this is just quickly go through change orders. That has a bad reputation in our industry for good reason, because change orders can dramatically increase the cost of a job, which you don't want. But at the same time, they are a mechanism for changing things if you decide you want to add a skylight or take out a window or whatever. That's how you do it. It should always be done in writing, and if it's not in writing, it's not really binding, no matter what the contractor claims. And continue. And so that's a change order, doesn't matter form. This is a handout that you can pick up. I think Carrie has just some suggestions of questions you might ask contractors. I think that might be the end. Keep going. Oh, lastly, just the emotional roller coaster, which means that be prepared. You've already had a horrible experience, okay? So you're starting kind of at a low point, but you're going to be going up and down through a process that's going to take many months and probably literally a couple of years before this neighborhood gets reestablished. And it might be 10 years before most of the scars are gone. So I'm sorry for that, but just be prepared to go up and down a little bit and try to get some people to help you who can help you in such a way that you can navigate those ups and downs as well as possible. Is that the end? Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks. So I just wanted to tie back to a couple of things in terms of the handouts, make a couple more housekeeping things, and then we'll open it up for questions, okay? So one thing that you heard was that both Michael and Jim mentioned using licensed contractors and vendors. So I wanted to note that that you can always check the licenses with the Contractor State License Board, the CSLB. We have information and about the CSLB in our white resource guide. And in the vendor referral list that we put together for today's event, we did try to list wherever possible their actual license number so that you know that those folks are licensed. Another quick housekeeping note that I forgot to mention is that during each of these workshops, we are doing a quick little raffle from one of the vendors next door. So for this raffle, there are 4 Platinum movie tickets that All True Construction, Greg Kleinsmid, has donated. So just please make sure to raise your hand if you need a raffle ticket, and Amy can make sure that she gets that from you. And we'll pull that at the very end of all of the questions. So we did cover a lot of information, and Jim and Michael and I just wanted to make sure that we had a lot of time to answer your questions. And there is a freestanding mic that we'll pass around. Amy, can I ask you to help pass the mic around as needed? And so please just feel free to raise your hand and ask a question of Michael, Jim, myself, if I can be helpful, and Aaron is also, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot, Aaron, is also here.
And need a raffle ticket?
Thanks. Thanks, Amy.
How do I get
One of the things, my home was one of the ones that was incinerated. And one of the things I've found very frustrating is that I've talked to a couple of contractors and I've talked to a couple of builders, and maybe I'm just talking to the wrong ones, but I get the idea that unless you hire them, they can't give you an estimate because there's so much work in figuring out how much it is that you get these vague numbers like, 8 to 9 to 12% of the construction cost, and that's really hard to take back to the insurance companies. So am I just talking to the wrong people, or is this something that's really true, that you actually have to hire someone in order for them to tell you how much it's going to cost?
Well, I can start, and I think that it's two different issues here because there's the potential, there's the price of the house that was there, and coming up with the cost of something that's no longer there as part of your insurance settlement. That's number one. That really is coming up with something out of thin air to a degree, but very important, and I think that is where an architect can get involved to help you, because you can't, a contractor can't price a description. And so this has to do with both the existing structure that's gone, that may need to be rebuilt on paper to price, and then it has to do with the new building. And so I think that the contractors, in a sense, that you're not asking the wrong people or even the wrong question. And it is a correct response in a sense, is that they need to have something to price, which is the drawings, which is the contract documents, its drawings and specifications. How detailed do they need to be? Well, the more detailed, the better the price. Just like he's telling you, if you get this 15-page long, 300-line item bid, you're going to get a lot of accuracy. So you have to start and create a document that can be budgeted.
On the same lines
Could
as-
I comment one thing, though, quickly? So I can pull this up. Just to say that I've had very good success getting the insurance companies to pay for those consulting fees.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't at all, that's a absolutely legitimate and necessary expense, even from their interest. No one can estimate it without very accurate, what we used to call them was-built drawings, what was there. And then you have to pay consultants to figure it out, because there's no job there for the construction people. There's no way for them to recover any fees on the back end. Now, if you have a plan for a building you're actually going to build, it's
Yeah,
different.
It's a different thing.
But do you see the difference?
Yeah, I guess so. It's just like my insurance company. Where's the microphone? Because, I tried to, find this out in advance, but then my insurance company just cut me a check for the house. And the way they calculated it was they had an itemized list of all these things that I don't know if the prices are even realistic. And I don't know if I have got enough money or not. And, I don't know
Well,
if I
you
should
don't. It's an
fight with
insurance-
the insurance company or fight with PG&E.
Well,
It's
come
just
to
very
the
confusing.
next talk. We'll talk about it.
Okay, great.
But there are ways around it, and you can have people get paid by the insurance company.
I just wanted to add what my wife was saying. It was like 1, 2, 3 days after the disaster, our insurance company, dropped someone out of a helicopter from some, actually it was a local construction firm, and he sat me through, and I went through this, through my anguish. I was going through mentally what I gave a description of the house. Within a week or two, he came back and emailed me a rough plan, along with this huge list, down to the minute details, like so much money for X linear feet of counter space, right? How do we validate it, counter that, and get that adjusted to meet our needs? Because I don't even know what the prices were based on. Is
See that
it
woman standing
national
next to you?
average? Or
Amy is the best help you could get, right there. You talk to her, and she'll guide you from there.
Well, not now, but I do want to say probably what that was an Xactimate estimate, which is a computer program that a lot of insurance companies use these days to generate these estimates. And they look really impressive because they're fat and they have a lot of small numbers on them. But a lot of it is pre-programmed, and so it's not nearly as accurate as you might think.
I'm not an expert in the insurance industry, but I think one of the things that you all have to keep in mind, and I think you're well aware of, is that we live in just about the most expensive place to build in America, outside of Manhattan, Chicago, and that's about it. Honolulu, and this is the top 2 or 3 most expensive place to build in the country. And if you get an insurance company that's coming from, Minneapolis, yeah, and they're going to tell you, well, the cost of construction is $125 a square foot. Well, that doesn't build a garage here. And so, it's 275, 300, 400, 500, 600. I don't think, you're probably not 600 or 700 in your neighborhood, but it's easily 300. And so I think that you have to be really careful, and you need to be prepared. I'm sure they're going to talk about it. You need to fight back. And I could see that you would want to get multiple bids on your was-built drawings, just like you will on your new house. And it does get into a whole conversation. Maybe we can use this as an opportunity to sort of move into that, because how do you select a contractor? And how do you pick a contractor? And I think that there's a lot of, I'm sure Michael's going to just chime right in here, because there's a lot of, in my 20, 30 years of experience working in building and design, there seems to be a perception in the community that when you're building, you have your drawings and you give them to 3 contractors and you get 3 bids, and then you sort of pick the low bidder and then you move forward, and it just never seems to be quite that easy. And maybe that works really well when you're doing a school, but it's not necessarily the best way to work on a residential project. And this idea of building the team from the beginning and getting people to be involved and help you work through prices and talk to more than one person. Well, I think, I'm not sure, but you should talk to the experts.
So
Absolutely.
yes, the question, can you repeat the question?
I think her question was that just because the insurance company has given you a check, that doesn't mean that's the end and that's all they're going to give you. That just means that that is an amount of money they have given you, and that's it.
Yeah, just to follow on that, it seems like, because we got a check too, and I'm pretty sure it's through the Xactimate calculations, because I was like, we didn't get a estimate. So from listening to Jim's talk, it's probably prudent for us to hire someone to do it as built drawing.
I like
to
the was built,
fully
because it's
the was
right.
built as
Yep.
built.
Absolutely.
And so to ask, what's the rough estimate for an architect to do an as built
It's an interesting
drawing
question.
for contracting? So we're not going all over
Yeah.
the place. I know
I
some
mean,
will say 1,500, some will say 5,000.
I would say it's probably closer to the 5,000 than 1,500, because
Yeah.
you really, it's not like going and measuring an existing house where I can send someone out and I send 2 people out and they're there for 5 hours and they measure and they go back to the office and they spend a day drawing on the computer, and you have a drawing, and they might go back for a complicated project and spend 4 more hours to double check measurements. Here, you have to do historic research. You have to spend time working with you, the homeowner, to sort of mentally work through how big was that bedroom, more or less, And there's a lot of key questions one could ask to start to pull that information up and extract it. But
I think a lot of us have gone through that. Like we did that, and we have a rough estimate of the exact measurements of everything, and it looks like we even have a drawing pretty much of all the things we went to with the insurance company. Said, yeah, this is the kind of doorknob we had, this is the kind of flooring we had, this is the kind of countertop. So we went through all that, but I don't think anyone has taken that and actually made a drawing for a contractor.
And the other big thing is that if I understand correctly, this neighborhood was built in the 50s. They don't build houses the same way anymore. And I think just about every insurance policy has code upgrade components to it, and
code upgrades too.
It's just the everything is different.
Yeah.
Everything.
Now,
about building
I
a house
know
now.
we're going to have to wrap up soon to turn over for the next workshop, and obviously there's a lot of questions. And for those of you who came to there was a meeting where the Department of Insurance came and the Contractors Licensing Board came, and I think at that meeting, I threw out there the concept of a scope of loss, that's different from an estimate, and how so many people get off track in their negotiations because they're talking apples to oranges with the insurance company, because almost nobody rebuilds the same house that they used to have, right? The problem is that what your insurer owes you is what it would cost, theoretically, to put back the old house. And the problem is, and I'm going to get back to your question, very few people want to spend the money to pay somebody to provide a detailed scope of a was-built, because, for example, somebody like Michael, now, to ask him to do that, he's going to want to do a really good job at it, and he might want to work with, an architect, and that's going to take him some time. So there are professional cost estimators, and they will do what we call a scope of loss. And some people decide I'm going to spend that money. It goes anywhere between $3,000 and $10,000 to get a professional construction estimation or a scope or a was-built. That's about our experience, between about $3,000 and about $10,000. Now, if you're already committed to a builder and it's a good builder, that builder may do it for you for free. They may just say, I'm going to absorb it into what I'm going to charge you for the project. But again, it's that unfortunate extra step that if you can take it, it's actually going to set you on the much better path toward a settlement. It costs money and it takes time, but at least you're going to be talking apples to apples.
And also remember that the 50s house had features in it that are a lot more expensive than current construction methods, and you're actually owed those to some extent. There's like, kind, and quality. We don't want to get into too much detail, but yes, sir.
This question has to do with the was-built drawings. Now, the area is a tract development, so all of the houses are somewhat similar, but with upgrades, bedroom additions or whatever. Isn't there some place that these drawings would be for those that lost their home?
I'm gonna have
that someone
Aaron-
would have a drawing like in the city
Well,
planner?
But
or
given
something?
that, we've already had a conversation about this and said, well, can't we just go to the neighbor down the street and someone who's 3 houses away and say, look, can you let us in your house for 6 hours and start from there?
Unfortunately, 50 years ago, they just didn't archive records the way they do now. So we do not have the original floor plans from 50 years ago. There are generally 3 subdivisions that this happened, Crestmore 2, 3, and 7, I believe, or 1, 2, and 7. And we have some home plans of people who did add-ons over the last 10, 20, 30 years ago, but nothing from 50 years ago.
Nobody has asked around whether somebody has a plan that's in their garage somewhere.
I haven't heard of any, no. And I've looked actually through the city's basement, too, to see if there was any left over from decades ago, and I could not find any.
Former mayors don't have any.
I'd have to say that given the relatively modest scale of this, that some collaboration would seem appropriate, and that if we can get some architect, who starts the process, and if there really was just 4 or 5 house plans, that it could become somewhat publicly accessible, and architects start sharing that documentation up front.
That's what I was thinking. Somehow, so the price wouldn't be 5, it'd be something.
But remember, your insurance company should be paying for these costs. They're not your costs. You didn't cause them. They're caused by a loss that happened to you. It was an insured loss.
But they won't pay for the.
Yes, they will.
It's part of the dwelling.
They will pay for it. If you don't believe me, I've done it many, many times. They will pay for it.
I think it's all a negotiation and a demand, and
You have to be smart, but they will pay. They must.
I have just a quick question, and I'm wondering if the two of you agree on what the actual cost per square foot to build in that neighborhood should be, because you just quoted something from $250 to $600 a square foot. My insurance company is saying $200 to $250, which sounded low to me. You guys do this every day. You've seen the neighborhood. What do you think? Would you two agree on a square foot price?
well, they're all going to be different at the end of the day, of course. But the number and cost per square foot are dangerous. But the number that jumps to my mind is around 3.
I would say 3 sounds low to me, but
Yeah.
I would say 300 to 500, depending on the customization. If everybody just had a complete straight tract home with really inexpensive features, perhaps 300. But I'll bet some people upgraded those kitchens and
Absolutely.
bathrooms, and they changed out floors to better tile or hardwood.
Right.
I'll bet they might have done some integral color. They might have had some really nice features in the homes, upgraded windows. There's a lot of things, upgraded heating systems. So this is where you're not looking at 300. I don't think 200 is realistic,
not.
unless they got one gigantic low-end builder, like was tried over in the Oakland Hills. I picked up 2 jobs halfway through from one of those big builders that came in, and people were so disappointed. So I think it'll be more 300 and up.
So I want to try to wrap up briefly. And so if you've come in late, I just want to let you all know that we will be having this workshop up on San Bruno Cable, and there are all the handouts outside. One of the things, I thought it was a great idea that maybe there might be some follow-up collaboration to try to figure out some of those plans. And if that's something that people would like to explore, we're willing to try to work with AIA and NARI and maybe figure out some way to make that collaboration work to get those 4 plans, if that would be a huge beginning first step for you all. And maybe that's a partnership that we can somehow figure with all the donations that have been made to this community. Maybe there's a way to make that happen. So I'm happy to follow up on that suggestion that came up out of this workshop. We did promise to pull the raffle, so hopefully everyone got a quick raffle ticket. And then I do want to make sure
You
that
need one?
go ahead and get which ones. And then I do want to let you all know that both Jim and Michael will be outside in the hall, and we'll continue having conversations out in the hall if possible. The vendors that we did talk to and that we put on the list are people that are aware of your situation, that a lot of this is going to be complicated and time consuming because of the insurance and PG&E claims that you all are going through. And so we did have that upfront conversation with the people on that list, that anyone who is on there is aware of that it may mean going out and doing more free estimates to kind of help you guys get a real sense of things. And so I do want to let you all know that beginning part, those contractors who are on here are aware that they're here to be part of the long haul. So those are who's on that list. So now we'll go ahead and pull the raffle for the movie tickets from All True Builders, Greg Kleinsmith. So it's 464-2340. You have to be present. So 276, last 3 numbers. All right, we have a winner. So with that, I want to thank you all for coming today. And again, please grab your handouts on the way out.